It's the Zach Martin Show on NEWHD TV. We're with Steve Conte, who is one of my favorite artists. Also, Patrick Bamburak, who is the one of our personalities. And the reason why he's on NEWHD New York and NEWHD LA is because he works for free. So as soon as we start having a payroll, Patrick is probably gone.
I'll be fired.
Who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
But let's move over to Steve Conte.
Good morning.
Hello.
Welcome to my messy studio. The House of Ziggy, it's called.
I do believe that I have told many artists all about this great album of yours, NYC, over and over again, ad infinitum. I think that you should be a household name. We're going to make that happen for you. All right. You may be already a household name. I have no idea. But before we talk about your album, NYC, which is my favorite, which I tell a lot of people about, why don't you give us a little bit of your rock and roll biography?
Well, let's see. Where do I start? I come from upstate New York, near Buffalo. Spent most of my childhood up there. Moved to New Jersey when I was about 9. So pretty much grew up there, Central Jersey, one town over from Jovies and Skid Rows, and about a half hour from the Springsteens and the Van Zants and all that. So I was like right in between the like Americana, blue-eyed soul kind of capital of the Jersey Shore, Asbury Park, and the like metal, pop metal, whatever capital of Sayreville. And I was neither of those things. I grew up loving the Beatles and the Stones and Zeppelin and the Who and Motown, Stevie Wonder, and that kind of stuff. And had my earliest bands, like every other kid, around town, teen centers and dances and all that, and battles of the bands, and then when I got old enough and finished school and everything, I moved into New York City and started gigging around with different people. I had my first touring experience with the legendary Blood, Sweat, and Tears, the jazz rock horn band from the 60s. They were still kicking around in the 80s, and it was just the lead singer, David Clayton Thomas, with a bunch of young guys, which I was one of, just out of school. And I toured with them a couple of years, maybe one and a half years, and then worked with Glenn Burtnick and Jill Jones from Prince's Revolution, and a few others, Delmore Brown, Bush Rock. And then I met Keith Brewer, lead singer, who would go on to form Company of Wolves with me. I had a blues band. We played every Wednesday night in Manhattan at the Acme Bar and Grill. And we had all kinds of people come down and jam with us. David Johansen and Willie DeVille and Julian Lennon and all these people. It got legendary. It was covered on the news, Channel 2 News, and Carole King and Phoebe Snow and Cyndi Lauper, and all these people would come down and sing with us. And one guy, Keith Brewer, came down, and the guy who ran the jam with me, Jeff Kent, may he rest in peace, said, "Oh man, you gotta write with this guy Keith. He's great. You guys have all the same influences." So he came to my house, and we wrote a couple of songs. The first one being "The Distance," which was our first single off the Company of Wolves album. But we wrote probably 2 songs the first day, 3 songs the second day, 4 songs the third day. And we're like, hey man, we should start a band. And because it wasn't that at first, it was just like a couple guys getting together to write songs. And so I said, okay, well, I know a bass player, my brother. And he said, I know a drummer, Frankie LaRocca, who had been playing with David Johansen and John Waite and Bryan Adams and Scandal. So we got together and we jammed, and it was like right off the bat, it was amazing. We sounded like Cheap Trick or like a heavier, Who, like heavier Beatles. Like we had the melody, all the melodic stuff, plus the raunchy guitars and big fat drum groove. Like Frankie was really into Simon Kirke from Free and Bad Company. So we had like all the right elements of like classic rock and roll band.
That's totally awesome. Now,
yeah.
when you decided to learn to play guitar, I know as a young person, there are those legends that you look up to. So, who are the ones that you tried to emulate from the get go? What would you say? Like, how about this? Put it this way: what are you a combination of in your mind? Because everybody's a combination, and they become their own masterpiece, but they borrow from each.
Whew, boy. Uh, who I would like to be in my mind and who I actually am might be two different things. But I would say like stuff that I use every day. I mean, like I love Wes Montgomery, bebop, thumb, complete jazz genius. I wanted to be that, but that's a lifetime's worth of work, and I got this close to it in the time I was studying jazz. Um, but I'd say, I'm somewhere between Jimmy Page for lead, Jeff Beck, Hendrix, and then for rhythm, Keith Richards, Pete Townsend, and then some fancier lead guys like Steve Morris and uh, who else? Some of the jazzier guys, the Mike Stearns and the John Schofields, and like that kind of thing.
Uh, I think that's a great combination, and we'll just leave it at that. Let
Yeah.
somebody who's watching think of the rest. I mean, I
Andy
kind of
Summers from the Police.
okay,
I
and
was
the
I was big
police.
into him.
I can hear some of the Keith Richards attitude when you play your songs, and what I really like about your style, it's fun. We're gonna play "Gimme Gimme Rockaway," fun song. I like how it opens where you got that. I guess the 45, the record, the vinyl, and you're about to play it, and then it takes off from
That's
there.
not me. You'll notice from the Ladylike Fingernails. That's
Well, yeah.
Tish. That's Tish of Tish and Snooky. Do you know them?
Okay. No, I don't know Tish and Snooky, but
Legendary singers from New York. Okay. Well, anyway, they were called the Sick Folks.
oh no, that's
Um,
sick. All
or,
right.
may-
So there,
or no, wait, I got it wrong. They were spelled SIC fucks.
yeah, I get
I
it.
knew there was
Sick,
I knew there was a
sick.
K.
Yeah,
There was a
yeah,
K left out somewhere.
yeah. That's good
Anyway,
stuff. All right.
but they
Well,
sang back up in the video, and I've done lots of work with them around town. And
all right. Well, that
legends.
that in, that in itself is fun. I get the sense when you watch the video that you were demented enough to go to maybe one of the beaches, and it was probably cold enough,
It was
and you're
November.
pretending. I knew it. I just knew it.
You can see
I'm
my nose is red.
no, I'm thinking well, there's nobody else out there. Obviously, he's pretending it's summer in the wintertime. All right, great.
Yeah, I got my Hawaiian shirt on
Yeah, it's
with a
good
leather
stuff.
jacket over it, though. Of
Um,
course.
and then this one album, we first met a few years ago, and you came into the studio, and we did an interview, and we talked about growing up in Matawan, New Jersey, and Middletown, and the clubs, and Jersey rock, and a little bit about the New York Dolls and your history, and working with your brother, all of those great things. Um, but this NYC album, if you were to ask me what albums I must have on that deserted island, that has to be on the list. It is that good of an album. I really don't understand how everybody doesn't own a copy. To me, it's just Frampton Comes Alive. Every rocker's got that in his collection. Every rocker has a Beatles album in their collection. Every rocker, if you call yourself a rocker, should have Steve Conte NYC. I mean, it really is. I'm not blowing smoke. I have mentioned you on the air many times. I've talked about you with other artists. I think even yesterday when I did an interview with Trope, I brought up NYC. I brought up Steve Conti. It's a must listen to. I'm very excited about the album. Um,
Well, thank you.
what? How were you able to write 10 incredible songs like that and put it all on one album? That to me, it's a masterpiece, Steve. I'm just gonna tell
Oh,
you that
well, thank
it's a
you.
masterpiece.
Uh, it has some very strange roots. First of all, my plan with the title of the album, excuse me, was to name the album Steve Conte NYC, which is also the name of the band, right? The name of my band at the time, which was really just me and whoever I put together for this record. I had the same drummer on almost all the songs, Rich Pagano. But my idea was, when people say, "Hey, do you have the Sergeant Pepper album by the Beatles?" Right? You say, "Do you have the Sergeant Pepper album?" So my idea was to make people say, "Do you have the Steve Conte NYC album?" Right? Because Steve Conte NYC is the name of the band. So I just named the album the Steve Conte NYC album, but nobody got it. Everyone called it the NYC album by Steve Conte.
Like I
So
was doing.
yeah,
Okay.
like you were doing, but everybody else, Steven Van Zandt, when he played it on Underground Garage every day for like 2 years, he said, "That's Steve Conte." I was like, okay, I guess I'll just go back to being Steve Conte now, and so every release since then has been just my name and not my location. Also, I was living in Europe at the time that I did the NYC album, so I wanted to sort of announce where I was from because I was playing gigs over there all the time, and this way it would show up on the marquee. It would say Steve Conte NYC. People would know,
Right.
hey, there's a guy from New York City playing here tonight.
Yeah. I mean,
But it was a
for
bad
people,
plan because it didn't work.
really, I
Well,
would think that
I mean, it didn't
around the
work for
world.
people that are trying to identify the name of the album,
Oh, I
and
see what you're saying.
you know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying. I mean, it worked for the gigs, sure.
Right, because
Yeah,
over in Europe, when they hear that somebody is in town from NYC, it's like meeting a space alien. They just have to
yeah,
go see it, right?
exactly,
Right.
exactly.
So that's good.
Yeah, because I was
Now,
living in the Netherlands. But anyway, to get to your question, so I was living there, and um, I had priced out some. I knew it was time to make a record. I had left the New York Dolls. I was with Michael Monroe. I guess I had been with him for maybe a year or maybe two by that point. Um, and I priced out some studios over there, and it was just too crazy expensive. And most of my band, all my band was in New York anyway. So I said, you know what? It's cheaper for me to fly home to New York City and use my own studio, which I'm already paying the rent for because it's combination recording studio, storage, rehearsal place. I share it with my brother and a few other bands. So I was like, I'm already paying for this place, even though I'm living in Europe. Why don't I just fly home and record it there in my studio? So I went home. So I had to think about casting, which is, I think, the number one job of a producer. It's like, what do you want the record to sound like, and who are the best people for the job, right? So, but first I had to think about who was available. I tried to get my drummer from the Crazy Truth, Phil Stewart, because that was the last record I had put out. He was in Canada during the time I was coming home, so I was like, okay. So I have to kind of use the people that are around, and I'd used Rich Pagano before. He's a great drummer, and my brother, of course, on bass. And I had a couple other bass player friends of mine, Sammy Yaffa from uh, Monroe and the Hanoi Rocks, and Keith Christopher from Georgia Satellites. But I started putting together a song list, and I had like written like four new songs: "Dark in the Spotlight," "What Would I Do If I Were Me." A lot of those songs on there are a few years, and in some cases even a few decades old, or they were while I recorded them. They're even older now. Um, but my goal was to like put together 10 songs that kind of hung together. And I also thought, you know what? I'm probably not going to be able to tour on this like I should because I'm living in Europe and my band is in New York. And so I should make songs that stand up on an acoustic guitar. Like you could play these songs just by yourself in a club with an acoustic guitar and they'd still hold up. There wasn't any big, psychedelic feedback jams that you need an amp for in a band. So that was my goal, to make 10 songs that you could play by yourself. And,
mission accomplished.
I mean, and yeah, and they rocked. There's a lot of them that just are great rock and roll tracks with, big guitars and big drums. But
Well,
you could still play them and they have melodies and lyrics that I believe stand up
well, they do. And
to the
what would
solo.
what's great about the Steve Conte NYC album, uh, the tracks on it. If I was to, let's just say I'm a guy with a guitar and I want to have a couple of songs that I would like to cover, I would probably grab a few of those because they're great drinking songs. I mean, it's just a fantastic album to go into an Irish pub and to just sit there and listen to. Every track is spectacular, anytime, at all times. Broken Spoke Saloon is a great tune. It's like, I don't know what it is about it, but one of my favorites on the album. Dark in the Spotlight, Happy Hour, Lady Luck, OK DJ with the F bombs at the end, which we play on New HD, Rockin' Rye Queen, She Blinds, Tax Free, and What Would I Do If I Were Me? Now, we're going to play that video a little bit later on in this interview. I want to go back to what we started from with the Sick Effers and play Gimme Gimme Rockaway.
Tough as life, back on the beach again, just a sunny day. Got no tan, rocking my leather man, New York to LA. The surf is up, we're pounding the pavement tonight, we're gonna play. Ooh, give me rock away. East Coast home, where I was born again, God bless rock and roll. Chewing some gum, bounce up and down with that little bit of soul. Feel fine, just in the nines and my hair all set to spray. Ooh, give me rock away. Stop before you hit Long Island. Cruising past Sheets and Bay. Pull over when you hear the sirens, there we pray. Ooh, give me rock away. Come on. Stop before you hit Long Island. Yeah, cruising by Jamaica Bay. Pull over when you hear the sirens, let I pray. Ooh, we never get locked away. Tough as life, back on the beach again, just a sunny day. Nightclub 10, rocking my leather man, New York to LA. Surf's up, the concrete's hard, and tonight we're gonna play. Ooh, give me rock away. Ooh, give me rock away. Ooh, give me rock away. Yeah.
What a great
Damn,
video,
that's-
man. That's fantastic.
Damn, that's good.
With the Sick Feckers. We'll just call them the Sick Feckers behind
Yeah, the
there.
Sick Feckers.
Sick Feckers.
The Sick Feckers.
Yes. What was the
Yeah. Wow, I hadn't seen that in a long time. It reminds me how lucky I am to have all those good friends that helped me make that video.
Well, what it showed.
That's Dennis Dunaway of the original Alice Cooper group. That's the original, the Frog bass that he's playing there with all the mirrors on it that he played with Alice Cooper back in the day, you know. And that's on the record though. It's Clem Burke from Blondie on drums and Andy Rourke from the Smiths on bass.
Now, Clem, wasn't he at one time one of the Ramones? He was Elvis Ramone, was he?
Yes, he
For
was.
2 days, for two shows.
Yeah, for a couple of shows. He was like the Jimmy Nickel of
right.
of the Ramones. Remember Jimmy Nickel who filled in for Ringo once on a
Yeah,
Beatles Australian tour?
Yep. I do remember that. Now, here's the thing. When I was listening to the song, I couldn't help but think of the Ramones. What
Of course,
inspired
because of
you?
Rockaway.
Right, Rockaway Beach.
Well, tell you the truth, I had that melody, and I had the chords, and I had the song pretty much without any lyrics, and I just kept singing different things over the hook, trying to get. I knew the hook had to be na 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 na. I knew that was going to be the hook right there, but I even have you know, this is my song, my recording tool, my iPhone. Um, I go to voice memos, and I turn it on and sing a bunch of stuff, and that's where I keep all my ideas. I still have the original idea for that, and it's me standing on a train platform in the Netherlands, going, a little far, a little bit of rock away, a little far to rock, too far to rock away. Gimme, rock. Yes, that's it. It just came to me. I started singing things that fit in that rhythm, and I thought, can I really write a Rockaway song? I mean, do the Ramones have the corner on the market of writing Rockaway Beach songs? I mean, it's not like they were from there; they were from Forest Hills, and but the beach has been come you know it's come to be associated with the Ramones. But so then I took it a step further, and I said, all right, well, the Ramones also had Gimme Shock Treatment,
Huh.
and but actually I know that Gimme thing because I'm probably a few years younger than the Ramones, but I remember the '60s, and one of my favorite songs from like the late '60s or psychedelic era was called Gimme Good Lovin' by the Crazy Elephant. Do you remember that?
Yes, of course. I
Yeah.
played them on the air. Crazy
Yeah.
Elephant. Yeah.
So Gimme Good Lovin' was I could always maintain that was my inspiration for the Gimme part because it is the first Gimme song I ever heard.
Well,
But yeah, I combined those two things and made it the hook.
now I got
No,
another
no
question.
genius there. It just
No, it is genius. It just
and
sometimes.
and you know, and I always wanted to write a song with the words "Sheep's Head Bay" in it.
Yeah, and
So,
Jamaica Bay. Did you even
Jamaica
take it?
Bay, Sheep's Head Bay. So I
I was
made
gonna
like a
say,
little travelogue of the East Coast, like Queens, Long Island.
yeah, that's good. Now who put the video together? Whose concept was that?
That well, that was my friend Peter Perenyi. You see at the end there, PRP Productions. He is actually the husband of Tish from Tish and Snooky of the Sick, you know what's.
Sick
Um,
Vickers.
yeah, and he and I were talking at a party one time, and he said, "Man, I'd love to do a video for you." And I said, "Well, I have a song that I'm working on. Um, I think I'm gonna do it with little Steven Van Zandt on his record label, Wicked Cool Records. He's gonna put out the single, and I need a really good video." So he's like, "Great, let's talk about it." We batted around some ideas, and we had like a bit of an elaborate idea at first, which we were planning on doing up until the night of the shoot. Not the beach thing, but the sort of indoor stuff with the dancers and the glittery stuff and all the people. It was supposed to be something else, but it turned out it wasn't looking right on camera, so we just kind of made it into a club performance, but a fun one with confetti and glitter, and I wanted to make it just a really fun video because it's a really fun song. So, but I wanted to do it on the beach, obviously, and unfortunately, it was November. We went around to shooting it, so as you can see, that first scene, man, my nose is
Yeah.
like pink and red.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, job well
freezing.
done with the video. It's really entertaining. It's fun. I like the pink 45 that starts out the video. Now let's move over to back to Steve Conte NYC, the album. What is your favorite song?
I go back and forth. I mean, let's see. Well, I really like "Dark in the Spotlight." Um, that was one of the more recent things that I wrote for the album, and it's more of a current uh, about people that I know now or that I've come to know over the past 10 or 20 years. and those types of people. It's not about any one person. I kind of write about composites of people.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say, oh, that song's about so-and-so. Well, yeah, it's a little bit about them, but it's also a little bit about Johnny Thunders. It's also a little bit about, Pete Doherty or whatever his name is from Baby Shambles. Yeah, that's what I like to do. I like to put kind of a bunch of people in a blender, and when one person's life starts to get too boring to take the real details from, I jump to another person's life and and make as if they're the same person that I was originally talking about. That one, also, She Blinds is another one. That song is probably, when I recorded it, it was probably 15 years old at that point, and it was a song that was sitting around that I thought there was something wrong with, because I'm a kind of a perfectionistic songwriter, and if I think there's like one or two words that I just can't fix, then I just go, well, you know what? I'll put that on the back burner and I'll come back to it. And then years go by and I write new songs and I forget about it. And I came back and I was looking for, like I said, those songs that that would work, would hold up on an acoustic guitar. And I sort of came across these sort of Americana sort of songs that I had, and I thought, this song could fit into that bag. And I listened to the lyrics. I said, and what exactly was wrong with this song? Nothing. I just been sitting on it for 10 or 15 years, and so I put that out. And at that point, I started thinking about that as being about my wife, which when I had originally written it, it wasn't. But don't tell her that.
Yeah. And I never break the guy code, Steve. Never break the guy code. I remember a couple weeks ago, I was really excited because I took your whole album and I decided to do something a little bit different in the music programming sense, where I take all the tracks and I dump them into basically a folder. It'll just randomly pick one. So I don't really, consciously pick the song. I let the computer do it. So I was so excited that you and I were going back and forth. I said, coming up in the 4:00 hour, we got Steve Conte, right? And I sent you the thing. We did the tweet about it. And I'm like, he's going to shoot me. I played Happy Hour. It was 31 seconds. But hey, it's the way it is. And I'm thinking to myself, well, hopefully he understands how much of a fan I am of his and how much I love his music, that even 31 seconds is great.
31 seconds recorded on an iPhone in a bedroom in Morocco.
See that? Oh,
on a $100 pawn shop guitar.
Which we're going to now play the video in just a few seconds here. What would I do if I were me? Which is filmed in Morocco, but I started to think, is he really in Morocco, or is he at the, what is it, Epcot Center over in the Morocco?
There was no green screen going on there.
Just kidding you.
It's all real.
So here we go with what would I do if I were me, from Steve Conte NYC, filmed in Morocco.
What would I do if I were me? Get me a home across the sea. Live like the king that I can be. That's what I'd do if I were me. Hey! What would I do if I were you? I wouldn't do what they told me to. I wouldn't believe a word was true. And that's what I'd do if I were you.
Yeah,
are you allowed to go back to Morocco, or they just said, "Listen, this guy's nuts.
he's
Don't let him in."
abusing animals. No, no animals were abused in the making of that video. That donkey belongs to my wife's uncle. Um, just got a little skittish, but I never laid a foot on that donkey.
Mhm. Well, that's good.
But yeah, it's a wonderful place. It's at the foot of the Atlas Mountains. You can see the Atlas Mountains behind me there in the background. And a lot of other scenes there from Marrakesh where we go. My wife's Moroccan and half Moroccan, so we go all the time. It's a
Nice. I like it.
wonderful place. And I wrote the song because I was actually living in the Netherlands at the time when I wrote it. I was like, I used to come up with a lot of good ideas walking my dog, Ziggy. Hence the name of my studio, House of Ziggy, even though he's no longer with us.
I'm sorry.
It happens. What are you gonna do? Thanks. But I was walking Ziggy, and I used to get a lot of good songwriting ideas, and I just said that phrase to myself. I didn't know if anyone had ever said it before. What would I do if I were me? And I started thinking, man, the words just came. I'd give me a home across the sea. That's where I was living. I was living in the Netherlands, and I figured it would also, Morocco is across the sea from New York too, so it worked.
It's fantastic.
filmed the
I
video in
like.
Morocco.
I do like your style. I know that you're working on a new album, but before we
Yes.
get to that, what would the Steve of today tell the Steve of yesterday? If there was that one thing you like to tell your former self, what would it be?
Like how far yesterday? Like
It can be
literally,
Steve,
literally
Steve,
yesterday.
Steve
the
at
same old-
10, Steve at 10,
Steve
Steve at
at
11.
10. Okay, because yesterday is pretty much like the day before, and like the day before, and like the month before, and like the month before, and
Right.
you know, this pandemic is just killing me.
It's yeah, I thought it was still March. What? It's the blip. You ever
Yeah.
watch the Marvel comic series? It's the blip. It's what it is. All right. Go ahead. What would you tell your
Well,
10-year-old self?
Wow, a lot to think about there. I mean, when I was 10, the possibilities of it were unlimited and yet limited. Like you could actually, I mean, the bands that were around when I was 10 and doing it, uh, you know, that's what made me want to be in music. And of course, that kind of thing is not possible anymore. There are no record stores, there are no records, unless you're doing like a limited edition vinyl to, it's all about streaming and downloads and all that. And as we know, um, there aren't the opportunities for, guitar, rock and roll music like there used to be. There aren't there's a lot of stuff has changed. So what would I tell myself? Learn business because, I'm pretty good at creating the art, but there are a lot of guys that know, oh, you got to get on these playlists and you got to, this is the future. This is the way it is now. You can't, I mean, I know that, like I said, there's no record stores anymore and the whole business has changed, but I'm not prepared business wise for like doing this all myself, like being a DIY one man operation that can, you want to know why the NYC album, the Steve Conte NYC album, didn't blow up because I don't have the advertising dollars. I don't have the marketing money. I didn't have the money to push it to a independent radio promoter to get it to all the stations in the country and all that. I mean, if you don't have the big machine behind you, and most people my age don't, because let's face it, labels are looking for young, sort of hip hoppy, kids.
I
Dancey EDM, laptop music. I mean, once in a while, a good rock band gets through or something, but it ain't like it was even in the '90s. I mean, grunge was the last dying breath of rock and roll being the mainstream music in the world, and then it just went hip hop and kid and EDM, and everybody got Pro Tools and everybody got Napster, and record stores died, and you know the rest.
I did ask you, who are your influences? Like, how do you borrow from each and make it into your own masterpiece? Is something else that I find really interesting. Because if you were to ask me what kind of disc jockey I am, who did I borrow from? I will tell you, Scott Muni. You can hear it. Don Imus, I worked with him. Dan Graham, we have almost the same type of one-liners. We like bus balls. I think that's about it. So I got those 3 or 4 guys, and then what I've done is I created my own style using portions of those guys. You know what I'm saying? Like some of their little tricks along the way.
Sure. Well, that's kind of the same for the influences I brought up. Like I said, my favorite rhythm players, that influenced me were like Townsend and Keith Richards. But the last thing I would ever do is to play a Stonesy kind of rhythm guitar riff for a song and then play a Keith Richards kind of lead. I would do the opposite. I would if I got like a Stonesy kind of rhythm, I'd go Jeff Beck on the solo, or a Hendrix, like something that Keith Richards wouldn't do or Townsend wouldn't do.
Almost in your mind, improving the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
I mean, because to me, in some ways, I almost love the expensive winos more than I love the Stones, because it's just such a killer rhythm section, and it's got Waddy Wachtel along with Keith on guitars, and I've always loved Waddy's playing from the Linda Ronstadt records and Warren Zevon records, So it's like it's got a little more finesse in the lead playing department. Although you gotta love Keith's sort of
well, he's just got a way about him.
Caveman approach to he's just got the Chuck. He just does Chuck Berry.
He just does it right. You brought up Waddy, for instance, and I don't know the answer to this. Maybe you do, because every time I hear the name Waddy and I see his face, I could swear that he was on tour with Stevie Nicks. Did he do?
Yes, he was in Stevie Nicks.
All right, so
he's a very West Coast guy.
Edge of 17. That's him in the beginning. That beginning, is it?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah, but see, I always picked. I'm like
long curly blonde hair.
Yeah, Waddy. Yeah, right.
Long nose.
So I guess I was paying attention in Rock and Roll 101. If you were to say, compared to other albums, great albums of all time, what would you put? And this is my final question. We'll talk about what you're working on now. Where would you put Steve Conte NYC? Like, is it a Sgt. Pepper? Is it your Sgt. Pepper's? Is it your Dark Side of the Moon? Is it your Tom Petty's greatest hits? What is it in your mind?
Whoa. That's a tough one, man. I don't know. Like, I guess I would just have to look at it from my solo band perspective. Like, I've had albums with my songs on it from Company of Wolves, like I started telling you about before. Then, my bands with my brother, the Crown Jewels and the Contes. But since I've had my own band, just my name in front, I've only done Steve Conte and the Crazy Truth, Steve Conte NYC, and then the past 2 releases, the International Cover-Up, the covers album, was just Steve Conte, and those aren't original songs, and Gimme Rockaway. So really, it's only 2 full-length releases up until this next one, which is coming out. I have not announced the name of it yet. Maybe I'll out it on this show. But anyway, so I'd say it's my best album so far, but I wouldn't venture to put it up against something like Sgt. Pepper. I mean, it was an amazing concept album, and had so many different styles and instrumentation, the Indian orchestras and orchestra, and crazy tape loops and all that stuff. So it's it ain't the innovator that Sgt. Pepper was. So I wouldn't say that. I'd say it's my my Rubber Soul.
Okay, great. I mean, look, it is a great album, Steve.
Which is also, I would not compare. I don't think I'm comparing my album to Rubber Soul.
No, it's okay. No, hey, listen.
One of the greatest albums.
That's the beauty. Like, if you can say, all right, this is one of my favorite albums of all time, and I think that it's on par with that, there's nothing wrong with being that proud of yourself and that confident in your abilities, because you do have them. You're great. You're a great vocalist. Now, that my question to you is, who are the vocalists that have inspired you? We talked about guitar players.
Well, I'd have to say John Lennon, because he's probably the first singer that really moved me. Even the crappy Beatles songs, like the first album I ever owned was Beatles '65, which is the one that came out here in America around the time of maybe Beatles for Sale. And it had a crappy song called Mr. Moonlight. It was a cover. You know it? The Lennon sings.
Vaguely.
Lennon sings it, and the
Yeah.
first, it starts out with Lennon going, Mr. Moonlight.
Oh,
And
yes.
it's like,
Yeah, I remember.
his voice is just, it's so, and I hated the song. I would just listen to that intro over and over again. Because then when it came in, it had this like corny organ, and it was a really bad track. It was probably the worst Beatles track, in my opinion, on any Beatles album. But so Lennon was my first vocal influence, and then I heard Steve Marriott, The Small Faces, and Ichiku Park shortly after, and loved that. Loved him. Humble Pie. Paul Rogers, Free, and Bad Company were huge for me in high school. I can't say Jagger was. No, I never aspired to be. I liked his diction.
Yeah.
The way he spit out words, but I never thought his singing was, it was more of black singers, Stevie Wonder, Otis Redding, and Wilson Pickett was my big guy. And
I
Gladys
kind of
Knight.
like Roy Orbison, right?
I like Roy.
I liked the whole Traveling Wilburys and how they sounded in their harmonization and all of that stuff. Kind of dig that. I like Paul Rogers as well. And man, I'll tell you, uh, Robert Plant, great vocalist, but man, what a killer harmonica player. I mean, people never realize that he's quite the harmonica player. I had never heard
Yeah.
of. No way.
Yeah, I mean, I've come to appreciate Plant a lot more, especially in his post Zeppelin stuff, because a lot of what people mock on on Zeppelin 4 is like the extended guitar solos, the extended drum solos. Oh, it was too bombastic, and everything was over the top, and it was caterwauling. Hi, all that stuff. That was my least favorite Robert Plant stuff, but the album he did with Alison Krauss, it just kills me, man. His voice is so beautiful in that mid to lower range, and on Zeppelin stuff he got it too, like Zeppelin 3, That's the Way and all those kind of
Great album,
songs, and Tangerine, and he just has a beautiful mid to low range. But I wouldn't include him in my singers that influenced me. Although I was listening to so much of the guitar and the composition and the Page stuff that I'm sure the Plant stuff went in, and a lot of that stuff just comes out in phrasing. If I ever notice myself doing another singer's lick, it's usually an R&B singer or a soul singer, or Chris Whitley. I really, really loved Chris Whitley. New York. A lot of people don't know him, but are you familiar with him?
No.
Chris Whitley came out in early '90s in New York. Signed by Sony.
Oh, you know what?
Played his Duolians and
well, here's yes,
resonator guitars through Marshalls, and he had this high falsetto, haunting, not commercial at all, but just an amazing performer and singer. Really shy guy, but he just had such a unique, incredible style, and I've listened to those records over and over, and his voice has gotten into my head somehow too, where I find myself channeling him sometimes.
Well, that's good, because when you go to your YouTube channel, I did hear the Chris Whitley. I heard that today, because I was trying to get the videos for this interview, and somehow, for some reason, he was in your area when you did the search. So I started to listen. I'm like, hey, that's really cool.
Was it My Heart Is Ready Now? There's a video of it. They're in the street, black and white video in the street.
I don't know off the top of my head. I can't find, but I did pay attention. I did notice that. All right. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
let's bring Patrick in, and he
Come
can
back.
wrap it up. Want to talk about Patrick's album that
There's
he's
the
got
kids.
out?
I hear the
Open
kids.
Your
You can
Eyes.
hear him, right? That I've been muted the whole time.
But Patrick, with Steve, and this is you're the person that introduced me to Steve Conte a
Yeah.
few years ago, and you were the guy that made sure I got the NYC album. So Steve Conte NYC. So thank you for that.
I'm a huge fan of Steve's.
Yeah.
Huge fan of Steve's.
Thank you, Patrick.
Why don't you take over from here, and I'll remove myself, and then both of you talk about the new I guess albums you got coming out if you want to. Give us a tease, Steve. You don't have to give the name. We'll have you back.
Well, first of all, though, one of the things I want to say in looking at Steve as a solo artist, and then, the audience out there knows Steve Conte from his time in the reunited New York Dolls. And I have to say, as a musician and also as a fan of the classic Dolls too, I think Steve had the biggest job in that lineup, the biggest load to carry there, and the expectations of what that reunion were going to be. A lot of that weight rested on Steve's shoulder, and it blew me away just how successful that was. How you filled that role, and the records that followed too. So it was really the launch of a great era in the history of this iconic band, and very few people could have stepped into that spot. I mean, that must have been a big challenge.
Well, thank you, Patrick. Yeah, it was kind of ignorance is bliss for me, because I was not a Johnny Thunders disciple. So I wasn't walking into it like, oh my God, I'm taking over for the man. It was just like, okay, I'm going to play some rock and roll with this legendary New York band. It wasn't like I didn't realize how fanatical people were, until like I started getting some, and it didn't happen very often. I'd say probably in the 6 years I was with the band, it maybe happened 6 times. Maybe once a year somebody would go, Johnny wannabe. And I'm like, no, it's called Italian, it's called hair, it's called nose, it's called Gibson guitar, it's called rock and roll,
Right, you had the look long before the Dolls, for sure.
Yeah, who knows where I was, like Johnny was trying to do. I was trying to do Keith Richards, or Ronnie Wood. But so, I didn't feel like a weight on my shoulders, like, oh God, I have to live up to this. I just figured, like I've said in so many interviews, I sort of listened to those records and I thought, okay, so Thunders basically loved Chuck Berry, and he turned up loud and, played some basic blues patterns, so if I just stick to my Chuck Berry roots, who was my first guitar influence, really, lead guitar, just stay in the Chuck Berry mode, I'll be safe, and after excuse me, after the initial like reunion shows at Royal Festival Hall, where we just played the Dolls' existing songbook, when we got into the studio albums and I could put some of myself into it, I branched out a bit and did things that Thunders would never do. But, in the early, the first year or two, it was just like, get in the mindset of that, garage band guy.
Right. Well, and I guess one of the things that happens is that, with the skill set that you have and the different experiences and stuff, you have to actually be more than the legend of the shoes that you're filling anyway, because the legend always exceeds what the perception of that legend always exceeds what the person really was, So it was a thing where I think all those stars aligned, and the skills that you brought to that, and that are evident in your solo career, was a huge contributor to the success of that era. So very cool. So. And it was great to hear you talk about your album to Steve Conte NYC, because, my last record, Open Your Eyes, came out a few years ago, and it was a similar situation of having a backlog of songs that, I had actually written and recorded for other artists and other projects that were sort of sitting idle. And I was saying, why are these still kind of sitting around doing nothing when I can release them, recut all the leads myself. Let's enhance the recordings and put it out there. And it felt like it was a brand new record, even though I had lived with those songs a lifetime. So it was it's a similar process, I guess. And like you said, like, you don't realize how much you've accumulated and what you're sitting on. And then when you let it out into the world, you're asking yourself, why did it take so long for me to figure out to release it?
It happens every record.
Right.
I take way too long between records, but yeah.
So what are you working on now then? So you said you're working on a new album, and how is that? Is it a process of still clearing out the classics, or you have new material too as well?
Oh no, I have new material. Well, actually, let me think. Some of the songs go back, yeah. Like the NYC album, or the Steve Conte NYC album. Sorry. The songs, a couple of them go back. One goes back to like the mid-90s, actually. But, the thing is, again, I made an album that is not trendy. It will never be trendy. So it's the kind of album that could have been made in, 2021 or 1971 or 1981. Probably more like 1981. I think of it as like, if I had to compare it to a sort of pocket of albums, I'd say it would be like Stones 78 through 81, like Some Girls, Emotional Rescue, Tattoo You, kind of punky Stones, if you will. But there's also some like gospel-y and acoustic stuff, but it's basically just a rock and roll record.
I guess the beauty of the digital download world too, where sort of, the listener can access anything from any era, is that everything that's old is brand new, and everything that's brand new could feel like it's old and always been out there. So time doesn't really matter anymore, I guess it matters with the, if you're talking about top 40 and what the,
what the kids
the
are
corporation, right? Push on the kids, but
I'm never doing that. So, I don't have to worry about sounding outdated because I have the wrong, plug-in or synth for this year, or drum machine or whatever, or sample. I'm using old guitars, old amps, vintage drums, vintage, tape machines, but it sounds huge. Like I'm going through the mastering now and mastering the record. I'm saying to the mastering guy, it's recorded to sound like it could be from the 70s or 80s, but I want it to compete and sound as big as Foo Fighters records, or so it doesn't sound like this big, on a radio station. If God forbid, I was so lucky to get played next to the Foo Fighters anywhere, it wouldn't sound like exactly. The wheels are spinning. So it's got to compete sonically with what's going on now, but I never try to compete with what's on the radio. I do what I do. I do what I love, and hopefully there's an audience for it. I know there's an audience for it. It's just with my limited, marketing funds, how to get it to the most people, get it in front of the most people. That's always the challenge.
I could say this though too, as an artist myself, and this is common among artists in the industry. And you look up sort of the journey, from the garage up into kind of the big stages, the industry itself. There's always someone out there saying, "I wish I was that guy," and there's a lot of people who wish they were Steve Conte. Because the resume that you have, the experience you've had, and you take. I look and there's a lot of people I guess we know in common, and I'll see everybody knows Steve Conte in New York, all the musicians in the circle and stuff. But then the next moment you're seeing, Steve's on his way to Europe to tour stadiums with Michael Monroe and play, open up for Guns N' Roses, and you're on the stage with the New York Dolls. So you're at every level of the industry, and I guess that in and of itself means that no matter what, you've already made it a million times over.
Well, yeah, I think about that. I think, and and one thing that I always have to keep in my mind is something that Marlon Brando said: never let the size of your paycheck reflect the amount of your talent, or something like that.
Yeah.
All right. So, you would think, for a guy that's, on all these records and has been in these bands, I'd be, rolling in money in cars and houses. And, I'm just struggling along like every musician is, relatively speaking. I mean, we all have our, it's relative, but, I go without things, sometimes because I don't have the, I don't have the Beyonce money. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, but
Yeah, like disc jockeys do. Come on, guys, give me a break.
Well, you got a hot car, Zach.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah,
do
you
have. I have a great car. The only time I get invited to a wedding is when they need somebody to be the MC, or they think I'm that type of disc jockey. So
Right.
I'm sure that happens to you guys, right? Oh, I'm having a big.
Oh,
after
I've gotten
COVID.
invited to weddings because they wanted me just to play.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right? Oh, come to
Yeah.
my wedding, and then and then there's no food there, and there's no bar, and it's like, okay, and I just came to play, I guess, and that's going to be my gift.
That's right. See, that saved you.
What's the card? The card goes back in the car.
Right. Exactly. See, that's what I'm thinking too. I mean, screw that. I'm not giving you $150. If you want me to do an appearance, it usually costs what, $750 minimal to have a guy like me show up at your party and do that kind of stuff. So look at it as a really expensive gift that you just got from me. You're welcome. All right. So you can go to Steve Conte NYC.com and buy the album. It's available on Amazon. I checked it out. Steve Conte NYC is on Amazon. You know that, right?
I'm sure it is. It's on.
It's on
It's
there.
also on Bandcamp.com. It's on.
Bandcamp's great.
Yeah,
It's
I just
on
released.
iTunes.
It's on
It's on-
iTunes, Apple
yeah.
Music,
And
Spotify, but don't do that because
Nah,
we don't
screw
get paid from
Spotify.
that.
1/1000th of a cent. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I know
what-
it's a big thing to get on Spotify playlists, which would be wonderful. But looking into how to do that. But I'm not going to pretend that I'm
well, I'll tell you what,
well versed in the streaming world. Because we don't get paid, so like, why should I bother? Really?
I'll just send this entire interview over to Spotify so that they can hear the interview as well as hear the song. So then you're on, but more importantly, you're on NEWHD. I'm telling you guys, 2 years from now, we'll be revisiting this moment, and you're going to both be going, "Holy shit! I can't believe how many albums I'm selling, and I'm doing tours." And thank you, Zach. Now, when you guys accept your Grammy, I tell this to everybody: you better mention my name up there. I have been mentioned in other people's books, Carmine Apiece. I am not mentioned in Carol Miller's book about her career, in which she goes, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be at Q1043. I go, well, Carol, you should have mentioned that in your book. So I'm just putting that out there. It's very important to give credit where credit is due. Am I right, guys? Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it is.
So I'd like to thank my parents, well, not so much my dad. And I'd like to thank Patrick for hanging out with us, as well as Steve. Steve, you treasure, and just keep doing what you're doing. I wish I had your talent. I can't play.
There we go.
You're confusing
Yeah, it
me.
is. It's the opposite.
All right. Okay. I'm sorry. There.
Yeah, my mole is on the other side of my face.
No, that's it. I got to go that way. Oh, all right. Wait, there he is, right there. Okay. So, now you derailed me, guys. But Steve, I wish.
Yeah, don't worry. I won't forget about you.
I wish I had your talents. Wish I had your talents. Wish I could sing and play guitar. Same with you, Patrick. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for the time, and look forward to talking to you again. And
My pleasure.
we'll have you back for your new album.
Do you want me? Okay. Let me just give you a little teaser. If you have a minute, do we have a minute?
I have a minute.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm not going to drop the name yet because I haven't dropped it anywhere. But it's a really fun title, and it's 10 songs of blues based yet punky yet power pop melodies and rock and roll songs. I have a number of special guests: Chris Spedding on guitar.
Wow! Oh, wow! guitar jamboree guy
Yes,
who can like
yes.
he can imitate any guitar player.
Yes, he's one of my
wow.
favorite guitar players ever, and he's on the album with me. We trade leads on one song. I have the rhythm section is Charlie Drayton from Keith Richards and Expensive Winos, the Vinyls, B-52s. Charlie on drums. My brother John on bass. Willie Nile and James Maddock helped me out on background vocals. Nikki Richards, Sophia Ramos, and LaJuan Carter Dent helped me out on background vocals. Craig Dreyer on baritone saxophone. Andrew Hollander, who co-produced it with me, on keyboards. And that might be it. And
that might be it. That's quite a roster of people that you have. I think you should just call the album Newark.
Well, it does have a location in the title, and it has something to do with where I live. But that's all I'm going to tell you.
All right.